Millionaire CEO's baby cried restlessly in the cafe until a poor waitress did the unthinkable. It was a cold, rainy morning in downtown Boston. The streets glistened under pale light, the swish of tires over puddles echoing through the narrow lanes. Small cafe on the corner, usually a haven for commuters and students, sat nearly empty. The scent of espresso lingered in the air, mingling with the faint smell of wet wool from coats drying by the door. Inside, Ella moved quietly behind the counter. At 25, she looked younger, thin, almost too thin. Her pale blonde hair pulled into a messy ponytail. Hair apron was faded, a small tear near the pocket, but she wore it neatly. Her hands wiped the counter with slow, steady strokes. The cafe radio hummed soft jazz beneath the gentle patter of rain. Then came the cry, sharp, high-pitched, unrelenting. A baby's wail sliced through the stillness. Ella paused mid-wipe, her head turned toward the sound, brows lifting. In the far corner, a man stood beside a stroller, tall, sharply dressed in a charcoal coat, hair damp from the rain. He shifted awkwardly. In his arms was a baby about 10 months old, fists clenched, face red with frustration. The crying intensified. Customers turned, then looked away. A couple exchanged glances. A barista disappeared into the back. No one moved to help. The man bounced the baby gently, whispering close. It only made things worse. The baby Leo screamed louder, twisting in his father's arms. Ella wiped her hands and stepped out from behind the counter. She hesitated just a second, then approached slowly, carefully, as if not to startle the child or his father. "Hi," she said softly. "Would you mind if I tried?" The man looked at her, startled. He was striking, handsome in a detached way, but the dark circles under his eyes and the tension in his jaw gave him away. He was exhausted, a man out of his depth. He began. "He doesn't usually cry like this. I don't know what's wrong." "It's all right," Ella said gently. "May I?" He blinked, then nodded. "His name is Leo." Ella extended her arms. Leo screamed harder as she neared, but she didn't flinch. She took him carefully, her touch calm and steady, and then silence. Leo hiccuped once, then again, and finally quiet. He nestled into her shoulder, a soft sigh escaping him, his tiny fingers gripping her apron. The cafe seemed to still. Even the rain softened. Jackson Carter, now standing empty-handed, stared as if she'd performed magic. Ella didn't seem to notice. She gently swayed, one hand cradling Leo's back, the other patting a slow rhythm. Tension dissolved. From across the cafe, a woman whispered, "He just stopped crying." Jackson stepped forward, voice low. "How did you do that?" Ella looked up, brushing a stray hair away with her shoulder. "Sometimes they just need a calm heartbeat." Opened his mouth, then closed it again. He could only watch. His son, who had been inconsolable for 20 minutes, was now dozing in the arms of a stranger, a waitress. She rocked gently, sidestepping a nearby table. "Do you want me to hand him back?" she asked, voice hushed. Jackson shook his head, still dazed. "No, not yet." He studied her. The softness in her eyes, the way she moved without hesitation. It wasn't performance. It was instinct, natural care. Ella smiled faintly, unaware or perhaps too used to being overlooked to think it meant anything. Leo stirred, then curled closer into her neck. The small sigh he let out made Jackson's chest tighten. Something about this moment felt impossible to explain. But one thing was undeniable. In a world where power and money fixed most problems, this woman had just done what he couldn't. And Jackson Carter, Millionaire CEO, could only stand there, silenced. Not by business failure, but by the quiet kindness of a stranger in a frayed apron. And for the first time in months, he felt human. The rain had eased by the time Jackson approached the counter to say thank you. Ella was back behind the register, sleeves rolled up, her hands red from wiping tables in the cold. She looked up as he stepped forward, the baby no longer in his arms. "Thank you for earlier," he said, his voice polite but distant. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't stepped in." Ella gave a small shrug and smiled gently. He just needed a little comfort, that's all. Jackson hesitated, then reached into the inside pocket of his coat and pulled out a sleek black business card. He placed it face up on the counter. "My office if you ever need anything," he said. Then with a nod he turned and left, his tailored coat catching the breeze as the door closed behind him. Ella stared at the card for a moment. "Jack Carter, Carter Dynamics CEO." She blinked, a small crease forming between her brows, but said nothing. She tucked the card under the edge of the register and went back to cleaning. Behind her, a co-worker appeared with wide eyes and a smirk. Was that who I think it was? Ella didn't answer. She was used to rich men walking into places like this. She had learned a long time ago that the fancier the shoes, the colder the soul. "Left his card?" her co-worker asked, already pulling out her phone to look him up. "Girl, that's not just anyone. That's the Jackson Carter tech billionaire single dad. Looks like a Vogue ad and runs half the apps on my phone." Ella didn't reply. She wiped the same spot on the counter 3 times before realizing she was still holding the cloth. That evening, just before closing, the bell above the door jingled again. Ella looked up expecting a straggler needing one last caffeine fix. Instead, it was him, alone. He approached without the usual stiffness of a man who was used to being served. But his presence still filled the space like a gust of cold air. "I hope I'm not bothering you," he said. Ella set down the dish rag. "You're back," he nodded. "I didn't get your name earlier." Ella. He repeated softly as if testing it. "I came to ask you something. And I understand it might sound odd." She folded her arms lightly, waiting. "My son Leo doesn't settle with anyone, not even his nanny. But with you, he calmed down almost instantly." Ella's brow lifted, cautious. "I'm wondering if you'd consider being with him. Not full-time, just part-time, a few hours a week. I'd pay very well." Ella shook her head. "I'm not a nanny, and I don't really get involved with," she hesitated, searching for the right words. "People who live in a different world." Jackson's jaw tightened. He nodded slowly, accepting the refusal. "I understand," he said. He pulled something from the inside of his coat again. This time a small envelope. "Still, I want you to have this. I just open it when you're alone," he said, his voice firm but calm. "No expectations." He placed the envelope gently on the counter and left without waiting for a reply. Ella stared at it for several minutes after he left. She almost threw it out, but curiosity and something else got the better of her. Later that night, in the tiny apartment she shared with no one, Ella sat on the edge of her bed and opened the envelope. Inside was a folded note and a check, $2,000. She blinked. Her breath hitched slightly as her fingers tightened around the edge. The note was handwritten. "If you need help or if you just need someone to believe in you, call me. Thank you for holding him like he mattered, JC." Ella closed her eyes, the paper trembling in her hands. Not from the money, but from the words, like he mattered. No one had ever said that to her before. And maybe no one had said it to him either. It was nearly midnight when Ella finally turned off the lights in the tiny kitchen. The apartment above the laundromat was quiet, save for the faint hum of city life drifting through the cracked window. She moved slowly, her body aching from another double shift, but sleep wouldn't come. She walked to the corner shelf near her bed, a shelf she rarely touched. With careful hands, she pulled out a small wooden box and sat down on the floor, legs folded beneath her. The lid creaked open, revealing a few faded hospital bands, a baby Moonet cap, and a single photograph. In the picture, Ella was younger, barely 21, with dark circles under her eyes and a tired but tender smile. In her arms was a newborn boy wrapped in a white blanket, his tiny face scrunched as if mid-dream. His name had been Noah. Her hands trembled slightly as she traced the photo's edges. Her throat tightened. She had never told anyone, not her boss, not her co-workers, not even her landlord, who sometimes asked why she always paid rent on time, but never turned the heat up. No one knew she had once held her entire world in her arms, only to lose him 6 days later. Congenital heart defect, that's what the doctors had called it. Something rare, something no one could have predicted. She had spent months drowning in grief that no one saw. And then one morning she'd gotten up, put on her shoes, and gone to work like everyone else. Her phone. The business card still sat on the nightstand where she had tossed it earlier. She picked it up, reading the name again. Jackson Carter. Carter Dynamics. Beneath the logo, a number. Ella stared at it for a long time. Her thumb hovered over the screen. Her heart thudded, not out of fear, but something more fragile. Hope. She opened the messaging app and typed slowly, deliberately, rereading it 3 times before pressing send. "I'll help with Leo, just part-time." Then she set the phone down, turned off the last light, and crawled into bed. She didn't know what this meant. She didn't know if it was a good idea. But somewhere deep down, something had shifted, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel entirely alone. The elevator chimed softly as it reached the top floor. Ella stepped out into the quiet elegance of the penthouse, the click of her worn flats nearly silent on polished hardwood. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the Boston skyline, but she barely glanced at it anymore. She was here for Leo. It had been 2 weeks since she sent that message. 2 weeks of part-time hours of learning routines and decoding baby babble, of realizing that she still remembered how to hold, feed, and soothe a child. But it became more than a job. Every afternoon when she arrived, Leo would light up, arms reaching, eyes bright. He didn't do that for anyone else. Not the housekeeper, not the parade of expensive nannies Jackson had tried. Just A and that quiet, undeniable connection mattered, more than she'd expected. Today, she found Leo on the playmat near the couch, chewing fiercely on a plastic giraffe. The moment he saw her, he squealed, tossed the toy aside, and crawled toward her with surprising speed. "Here you are, sunshine," Ella murmured, dropping her bag to scoop him up. Leo giggled as she kissed his cheek, tiny fingers gripping her sweater collar. Their days fell into rhythm. Bottles, naps, picture books, blocks, slow walks in the rooftop garden. Ella hummed lullabies she hadn't sung in years, but which returned as if they'd never left her. In between, something soft began to grow. She taught Leo to say ba and da. One afternoon, he repeated them back with gleeful pride. Jackson had walked in mid-call, frozen in the doorway, phone forgotten. Ella looked up, unsure if she'd done too much, but Jackson just smiled. That quiet, reserved smile she was beginning to understand meant more than it let on. In the beginning, he was all business, cordial, distant, professional. But recently he lingered. He asked questions about Leo's day, his naps, his new favorite song. Once, when she mentioned Leo falling asleep to rain sounds, Jackson had quietly replied, that was his mother's favorite sound, too. It was the first time he'd spoken of her. Ella hadn't pushed. She understood the kind of grief that lived in silence. One evening, a storm moved in. Rain tapped against the windows. Thunder distant. Leo, fighting sleep, lay curled in Ella's arms, his head heavy on her shoulder. Tension soared between them. Reasonable. Jackson had texted running late. Ella hummed softly, blending into the rhythm of the storm and city. Eventually, she drifted off too, her body swaying gently as she sat on the couch, Leo sleeping soundly in her arms. When Jackson returned, the penthouse was still, the lights low. The scent of lavender and baby powder hung softly in the air. He stepped into the living room and stopped. Ella sat with Leo cradled against her, her head tilted back, her blonde hair slipping loose around her shoulders. She still wore her café apron, now dusted with milk stains and a faint imprint of Leo's hand. Her lips moved faintly as if still humming. Jackson stood there unmoving. She looked like she belonged. He moved carefully, retrieving the knit blanket from the back of the couch. Gently, had draped it over both of them, Leo's small body and Ella's resting form. His hand lingered for a moment, brushing a stray strand of hair from her forehead. She didn't stir. His throat tightened. Jackson Carter had built his world on structure, solutions, control. But this wasn't a problem to be fixed. This was something else, something tender, something that made the sleek walls of his penthouse feel less like glass and more like home. He didn't reach for his phone. He didn't think about his inbox. He simply sat across from them, watching, listening to Leo's gentle breaths to the quiet. That night, Jackson didn't work late. He stayed home. The soft sound of Leo's breathing filled the penthouse as Ella gently laid him in his crib, a lullaby still lingering on her lips. The apartment glowed with the hush of twilight, a peace earned through shared laughter and bedtime stories. She reached to turn off the lamp when her phone buzzed. A message from her former co-worker at the cafe. "Girl, you're on the internet like everywhere." Ella frowned, tapped the link, and froze. A photo stared back at her. Grainy, zoomed in, clearly taken from a distance. She was leaving Jackson's penthouse building with Leo on her hip. The headline screamed, "Tech mogul Jackson Carter's secret flame." Meet the mystery blonde holding his baby. Her heart pounded. She scrolled more headlines. Is she the nanny or something more? Is Jackson Carter hiding a second family? Comments were worse. People speculated about her past, mocked her appearance, called her a gold digger. Some accused her of trapping Jackson. Ella set the phone down. Her hands trembled. Down the hall, Leo stirred. At that same moment, Jackson's office was in chaos. Phones rang. PR teams buzzed on speaker. His assistant looked pale. "She's trending, Jax, not you, her." He rubbed his temples. "I didn't even see the photographer." It's already gone global. The photo, the story, the speculation. Jackson's thoughts spun. Ella, Leo, the quiet safety of their home shattered. He left the office without another word. By the time he stepped into the penthouse, Ella was packing Leo's diaper bag. She looked up calm, but her eyes were clouded. "You saw it," she said softly. "Yes." She nodded like she'd been waiting for it. Jackson stayed near the door, coat still on. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not like this. Ella waited. He hesitated. "I didn't think it would go this far. I have investors pressuring me and the board." "I understand," she said quietly. He stepped forward, searching for words. "Maybe it's best if we take some space just until things calm down." A long pause. Ella reached into her coat pocket. She pulled out the key he had given her, the one with the little silver L charm Leo loved to chew. She placed it gently on the entry table. "No need to wait," she said. "I understand, Ella." She took a step back. "I told you I didn't want to be part of someone else's world," she whispered. "And I was right. I'm just a girl who held your baby. That's all the world sees. That's all you see, too." He tried to respond, but nothing came. From the hallway, Leo's cry echoed high and sharp. He had toddled out, sensing something wrong. Now he stood clutching the wall, eyes wide with fear. Ma! He whimpered, his small hands reaching. Ella knelt and kissed his forehead, holding back tears. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. This isn't goodbye. Just not now." Leo cried louder as she stood and turned away. Jackson stood frozen as she walked out, the door closing softly behind her. He picked Leo up, holding him tight as the little boy wailed against his chest. And for the first time, Jackson realized he had built a fortress. But now the only people who'd ever made it feel like home were gone. The sound of Leo's cries echoed off the marble walls of the penthouse. It was the third night in a row. Jackson paced the floor, one arm cradling his son, the other trying to rub away the exhaustion settling deep behind his eyes. Leo squirmed against his chest, his face blotchy and red, his tiny fists pounding softly in the air. "Shh, I know, buddy. I know," Jackson whispered, his voice frayed with desperation. "I'm here. I've got you." But Leo didn't stop. He hadn't stopped in days. Since Ella left, it wasn't that she quit. Not really. She had simply texted him one evening after her shift. "I need some time. Thank you for everything." No explanation, no return message after that. Jackson hadn't responded either. He didn't know what to say. The silence between them had stretched so long that eventually, it just became the new normal. And now this. Leo refused to eat more than a few bites. He cried through naps. He tossed it in his crib. None of the backup nannies worked. He screamed louder when they touched him. The pediatrician had reassured him that it was separation anxiety, but Jackson knew better. His son was grieving. The apartment, once filled with the soft hum of lullabies and Ella's quiet voice, now felt too big, too still, too wrong. In the early hours of the morning, with Leo finally asleep in his arms, Jackson collapsed onto the couch. His shirt was damp from baby tears and his muscles ached, but it wasn't the physical exhaustion that undid him. It was the silence. He reached for the remote and turned on the TV, not for noise but for distraction, then paused. Instead, his thumb moved toward the Penthouse security app. He hesitated, then opened it. There in the cloud archive were the clips. Days and days of motion-activated footage from the living room camera. Most were uneventful, quiet afternoons, deliveries, cleaning staff. But then he found it. Hello. She was sitting cross-legged on the playmat, her hair pulled up in a messy bun, still wearing that faded green apron from the cafe. Leo was giggling uncontrollably as she peeked out from behind her hands in an exaggerated game of peekaboo. His laugh, so free, so full, cut straight through Jackson's chest. Another clip. Ella reading aloud, her voice soft and melodic as Leo clutched her fingers. Another Leo asleep on her lap as she absent-mindedly stroked his back, staring out the window. And then a final one. Ella, alone, gathering her things after putting Leo in his crib. She stood by the door for a long time, just stood there looking around like she was trying to remember everything. His toys, the photos, the smell of the home. Then she walked out. Jackson sat frozen, the screen glowing faintly in the dark. His throat tightened, his vision blurred. He didn't remember the last time he cried. Maybe not since the funeral, maybe not even then. But now tears slid silently down his face. He'd never thanked her properly, never asked her why she came or why she left. He had been so careful, so controlled, afraid to feel too much, to hope for too much. And now the weight of everything he didn't say crushed him. Later that day, he stood outside the cafe where he'd first met her. The place looked the same. Same chipped red awning, same faint smell of burnt espresso in the air. But when he stepped inside, the girl behind the counter was new. "Excuse me," he said, trying to sound casual. "Does Ella still work here?" The girl looked up from the pastry case. "Ella," she repeated. "No, she left a few weeks ago." Jackson's heart sank. "Do you know where she went?" She shook her head. "No, she just stopped coming. I think she moved. I'm not sure." He nodded slowly and stepped back outside. The wind had picked up, biting against his coat. She was gone. And for the first time in years, Jackson Carter, the man who built empires, who made calculated decisions and trusted nothing to chance, stood on a street corner, feeling completely, utterly lost. It was nearly dusk when Jackson stepped out of the rideshare and stared up at the run-down apartment building. The brick facade was faded, the windows streaked with rain from earlier in the day. A familiar ache curled inside his chest. This was where Ella had once lived, where he had never thought to go until now. Clutching a small paper package in one hand, he walked up the creaky front steps and entered the dimly lit hallway. The air smelled faintly of old carpet and lemon-scented cleaner. He started at the top floor and knocked on every door, politely asking if anyone had seen Ella. Most didn't recognize the name. Some remembered a quiet blonde girl but said she'd moved out a few weeks ago. No one knew where. Jackson left the package with the building manager, asking him to deliver it to Ella's old mailbox just in case she ever returned. Inside was a photograph, Leo holding a crayon sign, his letters wobbly and uneven, the kind Ella had once taught him to write. It read, "Mommy Ella." Beneath the photo was a folded letter written in Jackson's usually sharp, business-like handwriting, but softened now by something raw, unfiltered. "Failed to protect the one who healed my son. I won't fail again. If you never speak to me again, I'll understand. But if you still believe even a little in what we had, come to the park on Friday, 2 p.m. No pressure, no expectations, just truth, Jay. That Friday afternoon, Ella stood outside the entrance to the park. The air was crisp, golden light filtering through the thinning trees. She clutched the letter in her coat pocket, her heart thudding so loudly it felt like it might burst. She hadn't replied. She hadn't planned to go. But something pulled her there, not curiosity, hope. Quiet kind of hope that had survived despite everything. And then she saw him. Jackson was sitting on the stone bench across the lake, dressed in a dark sweater, his posture relaxed but his eyes distant, watching the water. Next to him, the stroller held a peacefully sleeping Leo. Ella stopped a few steps away. He sensed her before she spoke. Slowly, he turned his head, and for a few seconds they just looked at each other. The wind rustled through the trees, scattering amber leaves onto the path. Then Jackson broke the silence. "I was very good at building walls," he said, not looking at her. "I spent years perfecting the art. But you didn't try to knock them down. You just stood there, patient, kind." Ella stepped closer, then sat beside him, her voice low. "I built walls too," she said. "I thought the less I loved, the less I'd lose. But then Leo came along and I couldn't not love him." Another quiet moment passed between them. Jackson finally turned to her fully now, his face open, his voice stripped of any defense. "I treated you like a risk, like someone who could disrupt my world. But the truth is, you're the only part that ever made it feel real." Ella's eyes shimmered. "So what do you want, Jackson?" He exhaled, then carefully, deliberately, "I don't want a babysitter. I don't want someone to replace anyone else. I want you here as yourself, as the woman Leo chose before I even knew I needed to, as the person I can't afford to lose again." She didn't respond right away. Instead, she looked over at Leo, who stirred gently in his sleep, his tiny hand clutched around the strap of his stuffed lion. When she turned back to Jackson, her voice was quiet but firm. "If I come back, there's no going back to the way things were." "I know," he said with a small, hopeful smile. "And this time I won't run." They sat like that, side by side, not needing grand speeches or dramatic gestures. Just the truth, just presence. And sometimes that's all it takes to start again. One story ended that day, and a new one, something softer, braver, and more real, began. It was a soft, late spring afternoon, and the little neighborhood bookstore buzzed with laughter, murmurs, and the rustle of balloons at the doorway. Inside, a banner stretched above the stage. "Book Launch. The Baby Who Stopped Crying" by Ella Harper. Rows of folding chairs were filled. Parents balancing toddlers, children clutching books, teachers, neighbors. Ella's old co-workers, even a few familiar baristas standing near the back. Behind the curtain, Ella smoothed the hem of her simple white dress and exhaled slowly. Her golden hair fell past her shoulders, and a small lion-shaped charm rested at her collarbone, a quiet tribute to Leo. She peeked through the curtain and smiled. Jackson sat in the front row, Leo perched on his lap. The little boy, now a cheerful toddler, clapped as he saw her. Jackson looked up too, gaze steady and full of quiet pride. Ella stepped on stage. The applause was warm. She took the mic, cleared her throat, and spoke from the heart. "This story," she began, voice clear, "started on a very ordinary day in a very ordinary cafe. A baby was crying and nobody knew why until someone held him, someone no one expected. The room stilled. I didn't know in that moment that my whole life was changing. Sometimes love doesn't arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it shows up in silence with a spoonful of oatmeal and a clean shirt." Soft laughter rippled through the room, followed by a breath of emotion. Ella's eyes found Jackson's again, smiled. Leo beamed. After the event, as guests trickled out with signed books, Ella stepped outside into the golden light. Jackson stood under a maple tree nearby, Leo dozing in his stroller. In Jackson's hand was a small velvet box. He didn't speak at first, just looked at her like she was everything he had ever hoped for. "Then you gave me the words. Now let me give you the promise." He handed her the box. Ella's breath caught. Inside was a simple, elegant ring, Etched inside the lid of the box were the words, "To the woman who made us a home." Jackson dropped to one knee. "No stage, no cameras, just them." "Ella Harper," he said softly. "Will you be not just Leo's home, but mine too?" Tears shimmered in her eyes. "Yes," she whispered 1,000 times. "Yes." 6 months later, the kitchen was filled with sunlight. Ella sat at the breakfast table reading animatedly to Leo, who giggled at every funny voice. The counters were cluttered with paint swatches and the final mock-up of her dream project. Leo's Corner, a cozy cafe bookshop opening soon. From the hallway, Jackson appeared, sleeves rolled, smelling of coffee. He kissed her forehead. "You're glowing," she lawed. "That's just Leo's yogurt on my face." He grinned and handed her a towel. "Still the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." Later that week, they hosted Leo's 3rd birthday in the backyard. Homemade lemon cake, yellow balloons, folding tables on grass. Laughter filled the air as children played and neighbors chatted. A little girl tugged Ella's dress and asked, "Are you his real mommy?" Leo ran over, wrapping his arms around Ella. "She's better," he declared. "She's my forever." Silence, then quiet smiles. Ella crouched and hugged him tight. Jackson stepped behind her, resting a steadying hand on her shoulder. They were a family, not by blood, but by love. The sky turned lavender and gold as they walked the lakeside trail. Leo ran ahead, laughing, chasing ducks with arms wide. Ella and Jackson walked behind, hand in hand, unhurried, peaceful. An elderly couple passed by, smiling. "Beautiful boy," Thiemann said. "Beautiful couple, first child." Jackson smiled. "First of many, we hope." Ella laughed, leaning into him. And as the camera pulled back, lake shimmering, golden light casting long shadows, the image that remained was simple. A family not made by chance, but by love, freely chosen and never taken for granted. Thank you for watching this heartfelt journey. If Leo's tears, Ella's quiet love, or Jackson's proposal touched you, then you're exactly who we create for. At Soul-Stirring Stories, we don't just tell tales. We stir something deeper. Love, healing, and quiet hope. If this story moved you even a little, hit that hype button, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because here we don't just share stories. We stir the soul. See you in the next one.